All right, that's done. Welcome everyone. My name is Amy Bastian. I oversee the grants and programs here at NC IDEA that support startup founders. My colleagues and I are here to talk to you today about the fall 2025 micro and seed grant cycle. Before we get into all the information that we have for you, and it is quite a bit, we'll go ahead and make sure everyone is introduced. Alan?
Hi, everybody. I'm Alan Younger, and I lead our programming efforts. I work directly with entrepreneurs every day and love doing it.
Yeah, and hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. My name is Lee Blancato. I'm also on the grants team as a program manager.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to get started. One thing we want to mention is the information that we're sharing with you today, including this deck, is already on our website. So we won't be sending out the deck afterwards, but if you go to ncidea.org, there's an orange bar across the top. It says learn more. If you click on that, that'll take you to a page with a lot of resources, including this deck, and then we'll put the recording of this info session up. Usually it'll probably be up there by end of day tomorrow, I would think, and a lot of other great resources. So we won't be sending this deck out after, but you can already go to ncidea.org and download it. All right, if you have questions along the way, just because there are so many people, we don't have the ability to let you unmute, but there's the Q&A function, so feel free to put the questions there. While one of us is talking, the others will respond, and then some of the questions you may have may be answered later in the presentation, so we may just say, oh, that'll be answered, or one of us may jump in and ask the other to address a specific issue that comes up. All right, go ahead and share. Alan and Lee, does that look good?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Great. So you will hear from all three of us today, but we're just going to take turns for right now. All right. So what we're going to go over today is a very brief introduction to NC IDEA, quick overview of micro and seed if you are not familiar, and then the specific timeline for this fall grant cycle, because we do have 2 grant cycles a year, and then application tips. And then we are happy that one of our past grantees, a seed grantee, Ashlyn Greer from Fashionably, will be here to just share a little bit about her experience, as well as she can answer questions that you have. So if you aren't too familiar with NC IDEA, we're an independent private foundation, and our mission is to empower North Carolinians to achieve their entrepreneurial potential. This is our 20th anniversary year, so it's been a big year for NC IDEA, and all throughout those 20 years, we have looked to strengthen the North Carolina economy through strategic partnerships with other organizations, as well as deploying funds directly to startup companies and programs as well. These grants, micro and seed, are specifically the very competitive grant programs for startup founders. The other work that we do, which we're not going to cover today, a lot of that work is for our ecosystem or entrepreneurial mindset. So if you want to learn a little bit more about NC IDEA, definitely go to our website. Our marketing team updates it regularly, including with our list of ecosystem partners that provide great resources for startup founders across the state. Since we're in the economic development space, we track pretty typical economic development metrics. We do this by following up with our grantees and then also employing other resources. So over the years that micro and seed have been around, we've awarded 449 grants to 418 companies. Some of those companies received a micro and a seed grant. So we know that 68% of those companies have been acquired or are still active. They've created over 4,000 jobs, and they have raised over $876 million in total funding, with 83 of these companies raising more than $1 million and 39 companies raising more than $5 million. And we say these are conservative numbers because our grantees only need to submit their annual surveys for 5 years. So there's definitely some revenue and some other funding information that we haven't collected past that 5 years. So this is definitely a conservative impact. All right, again, that was the brief overview for NC IDEA. Please visit our website to learn more about what we do. I want to give a shout out to the News and Insights page on our website. We cover and link to all stories about our grantees. So if you want to, and our partners who receive our ecosystem and engage grants. So if you want to get a better sense of just the ecosystem in North Carolina and kind of what an NC IDEA grantee, micro seed grantee looks like in terms of their business, their press coverage, definitely check out the News and Insights page. Specifically for micro and seed, these are grants, micro grant $10,000, seed $50,000 grants. And they're grants, they're non-dilutive. We don't take any equity in the companies that we support. Supports North Carolina-led companies that are early stage growth-oriented companies, but on a path to be multi-million-dollar or be investable. In the multi-million-dollar, the more multi-million the dollars, the better, the more competitive a company is. So these are companies that are usually on path to be $3, $4, $5 million plus, even if they're not going to attract like typical venture capital money. So because of this type of profile that we're looking for, these companies are typically addressing a large or kind of growing market opportunity and possess some type of sustainable competitive advantage. It doesn't have to be intellectual property. It could be trade secrets. It could be like kind of the founder experience. It could be first or early to market. And that the founders can describe what they believe their unique value proposition is. Since we're an economic development organization for North Carolina, even though we're a private foundation, so we support companies that are headquartered in and conduct a majority of their corporate operations in North Carolina. As well, there needs to be founders residing in North Carolina. There may be a staff members, team members, or maybe a founder who's outside the state. That's fine, but there have to be, the company needs to be identified here as a North Carolina company. Because we support companies that are so early, it's not as though companies may have even filed taxes in the state or, you know, have other kind of, I'd say like physical, like building presence in the state. So the way that we determine if a company is a North Carolina company is we check out the websites, we check out the social media accounts for both the company and the founders who say they're in North Carolina. So if you have recently moved to North Carolina, maybe you started your company somewhere else, that's fine. If you've relocated here and you're planning on growing your business here and it being a North Carolina company, make sure that your LinkedIn profiles and your websites all have the correct information. I won't go through this full list, but know that over the years, we've kind of put together this list of companies that are, say, out of scope in terms of not eligible. It's not an exhaustive list. It's just to give individuals a sense of the types of companies that are not a fit. So it's typically is like brick and mortar stores, businesses, companies that might be provide for a few founders, but don't have the opportunity or potential, I should say, to grow to be the multi-million-dollar or be venture backable. As well, if they're companies that just have a really long time frame to be commercialized, their technology, their product. So think of pharmaceutical companies that it may be 5, 10, 15 years with drug trials and may take 50, 60, $100 million to get to commercialization. Our 10 or 50K just can't really make that much of an impact. And if you have any questions, we have office hours, which we'll talk about later. And so we can answer those questions for you if you're not sure about your business type. And we also only support for-profit businesses, not for-profits. So one thing about micro, so I mentioned is $10,000. So again, we're looking for those companies that have that real growth potential. But not only is there $10,000, but the $10,000 also comes with programming and mentorship. Micro companies still need to demonstrate some proof of concept, validate some part of their business, even though they have a clear founder commitment. While early stage, a founder may be part-time on micro. I'd say about half of our founders, maybe a little bit fewer than half of our current micro founders are part-time, so they might be working, another business, but they are committed to the startup that they're applying for. They want this company to grow very, very large, but they may need to validate something about the technology, the market, before they can be all in the sense of going full-time on their idea. But the other thing, and now I'll talk a little bit later, is that Micro also comes again with programming and I say mentorship, which is we really help individuals build out their networks with Micro. Seed companies are a little further along than Micro. They've gotten some initial traction in the market they're looking to scale. They're still definitely early. They may not have revenue, but these are innovative startups. Again, we say the proven concept in the sense that they have some initial traction in the market they're looking to scale in. And it advances the startups and allows them to extend their runway, either by gaining customers and revenue or by hitting certain milestones that would allow them to attract grant or other types of funding. And there does have to be a full-time founder in North Carolina if the grant is to be awarded. Sometimes seed is the reason that a founder can go full-time. So they might be part-time during the application process, but they are very clear that if I was to, if the company receives the 50K, they're going to go full-time. Also, except for food and beverage companies that have more than 250K in annual revenue or equity investment, excluding friends and family, typically are less competitive unless they can really make a clear case for impact. The reason being is that if we have a certain kind of lane that we operate in, especially for seed. The companies aren't too early; they have a little bit of traction, but if they're already more than 250K in annual revenue, excluding food and beverage, or already can get that type of outside investment, they may be having enough traction that they can. While our 50K would be helpful, it wouldn't have as much impact as it would on another company that already doesn't have that revenue or investment. So for Micro and Seed, as we mentioned, this is the fall grant cycle webinar. We said that because we have 2 grant cycles a year. NCID is fortunate enough to have that budget for 2 grant cycles a year for Micro and Seed into the future. So we call them our spring and fall cycles. A company has to decide per cycle which grant they're going to apply to, Micro or Seed. So Micro, we award 15 grants per cycle. We have awarded 224 grants since we piloted this in the spring of 2018. Our goals for Micro is that the 10K plus the programming and mentorship and connections will help some of those companies move forward and be competitive for Seed in the future. So 31% of our Micro grantees have progressed at least to the Seed semifinals in future cycles. And 31 of those Micro grantees have gone on to receive a Seed grant. And Seed, we budget for about 6 grants per cycle. We've awarded 225 grants since 2006. And this fall will be our 40th Seed grant cycle. All right. I know it's a lot of information coming at you, so thanks for staying with us. Again, everything that we're going to cover is already on our website, this deck, as well as the time frame for the grants. So the applications will open July 28th at 9 a.m. and they will close August 25th at 5 p.m. We're planning on awarding 15 Micro grants in late October and 6 Seed grants in mid-November. There are different stages for Micro and Seed. So for Micro, we expect to have between 140 and 190 companies apply by August 25th. We have a group of reviewers who will help us narrow that down to about 30 companies. We'll notify all applicants on the 26th. Those 30 finalists will have a virtual interview with Alan, Lee, and myself, maybe a special guest from October 6th to the 15th. And then we'll notify all finalists if they've received a grant on October 21st. If you do become a Micro grantee, we'll kick off your programming and start getting those grant agreements together and get you funding in November. The programming will run more than likely from either late November or early December through February. During that time, we'll disperse your first tranche payment if you receive the grant of $7,500. And then we say the grant period will run through about June 2026. 2 months after the first tranche payment is dispersed, the remaining 2,500 is dispersed. I want to point out this time frame because if you fill out a micro application and you're talking about how you would use the funds during the grant period, know that no grant funding would be dispersed really probably before very early December, and it's not the whole 10K all at once. It would be 7,500 and then 2K 2 months later. All right. Now, as I said, the big part of micro besides the funding is the programming. So Alan, do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Indeed, I do. Thank you, everybody, for being with us today. A good part of our programming focuses on customer discovery, which many of you may be involved in it already. However, that's the process of really validating that the problem and the solution match the market need. So we'll work together to have a little bit more structured way of doing that, and work together to figure out what makes sense for each company, and then practice that together, as well as have actual interviews with potential customers. It also, this slide also points out that we'll do some other things in addition to the focus on customer discovery. We'll focus on building a roadmap for our company, our fundraising strategy, and pitch. And we'll have a couple presentations specifically on marketing and public relations. And then we'll have what we call fireside chats or roundtable discussions with some of our previous grantees that are successful in managing their companies. We do this, we do this over an 8-week period of time, and we typically meet on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 9:30 to 11, like it's noted here. However, everybody should allow some additional time, because in between the sessions, you'll also talk with your potential customers. In some cases have interviews with them, but in some cases just try to understand them a little bit better. And also you'll have the opportunity to have what we call check-in meetings, or have one-on-one or one team and a team of people from NCIDEA to help you through the challenges that you have. We also have, as part of this programming period, something that we call Mentor Madness. You'll have an opportunity to interact with a variety of people who have made themselves available a couple times during our program, so that you could meet with them and learn from them. And also you could tell them about your business, and they could give you some meaningful feedback. And continued coaching relationship may result from this session. So we look forward to you participating in the programming, as well as receiving the grant dollars if you're selected.
Yeah. And we just had our final program session with our spring 2025 grantees this morning. Yes. All right. Thanks, Alan.
Sure.
So the seed application timeline, they're more, so seed has an extra stage versus micro. So micro has the initial application, finalist, and then selecting the grantees. Because seed is more money and these companies are a little bit further along, the process dives a little bit deeper into their businesses. Excuse me, I think, excuse me, trying not to sneeze really hard, and that did not work. So for seed, we get, I'd say roughly the same amount of applications as micro. It could be the same as cycle, but as micro, last few cycles has tended to be 20 or 30 applications more. So we say between 130 and 180 seed applications. Again, that has the same deadline as micro. We narrow that down to between 20 and 24 semifinalists. So all seed applicants will know on the 19th whether or not they have moved forward to the semifinalist stage. And for both seed and micro, there's reviewer feedback at each of the stages. So if the companies move forward to the semifinal stage, they will have some reviewer feedback to think about as they update their application. If a company does not move forward, they will have feedback, so they have some insight into maybe what they could do in the future to just for their business in general, or to make themselves more competitive for seed or micro in the future. So the companies that move forward to the semifinalist stage, they work on their revised application. It's very similar to the first application. We expand a number of character counts for the questions being asked, so that the answers can be expanded upon. And a competitive seed semifinalist will update, maybe not every answer that they provided initially, but they will update their application to make themselves more competitive, incorporate recent updates from the company, as well as feedback from the reviewers. And then once those applications are submitted, then those will be reviewed again by some of the initial same reviewers, as well as some additional semifinalist reviewers. There's also a due diligence process conducted by our graduate associates who will meet with the founders, meet with references that are supplied, and again, follow up on any kind of outstanding issues. And then on October 24th, we will contact all semifinalists to let them know if they're one of the 12 companies that will move forward to the finalist stage. And then at that point, the finalists, they get pitch prep help, and then there will be an in-person presentation for all seed finalists, and it is in person, and it will be on November 7th. So there are 25-minute time slots where there's a 10-minute presentation and 15 minutes of Q&A with about 35 to 40 reviewers in attendance. And then we will notify all finalists on November 12th. We're sharing the seed grant timeline. If you're thinking about applying to seed, one, just so you have a sense of when the funds will be distributed, but also, again, keep in mind, if you're applying, the access to funds won't be the same day as we notify everyone. So November 12th, you might find out your seed grantee, but really it's in December that we're finalizing those grant agreements. We're meeting with each of the seed grant recipients individually, talking about how they want to divide those 50K into 4 different payments. So for micro, there's 2 payments, 7,500 and 2,500. That's predetermined. But for seed, we work with each startup to figure out what the time frame for their grant is and how the 50K is broken up into 4 tranches. I'd say typically it's a 6 to 10 month time frame for the entire grant period, which includes the 4 payments and then a final check-in. So again, as you were filling out your seed grant application, don't say, oh, November, if I find out I'm a seed grantee, I'm going to use the 50K to do this thing in November. Really, the earliest that the first payment will be distributed and more likely is in December. And then there has to be minimum 1 month between each of those tranche payments. So just keep that in mind as if you're applying and talking about the impact of the grant, it should make sense in terms of when the seed grant is distributed. All right. So I'm going to stop sharing. And Lee, before turn it over to you to talk about application tips, is there any themes of questions or anything that I think would be helpful to talk through?
No, I don't think right now. Yeah, the Q&A is being taken care of, so no questions to address live yet.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, I'll start sharing my screen. All right. Yeah. So I'll get into some application tips. So just things to consider as you're starting the application and writing the application. So you're submitting the most high quality business plan for consideration. So getting started, you can start your application today. So the application portal does not open up until the end of the month on the 28th, as Amy mentioned, but we have templates available online right now. The application is thorough and it takes time to fill out. We've had grant recipients say that they dedicate about 15 or so hours to the grant application. So definitely give yourselves time to fill it out. And the earlier, the better. There are no gotcha questions. They're all questions that you could anticipate answering about your business, about you and your co-founders, your team, business details, market opportunity, revenue, business model, other funding sources, grant impact, as well as milestones and use of funds throughout the grant period. So all questions that you could expect, but this may be the first time that you've actually written your business plan down on paper. And we do have character count restrictions for each question. So you do have to be pretty succinct in your answer. So just give yourselves enough time to fill it out. And know that every question is important. So if you give great answers to the first half of the application and then a couple sentences for the last half, that's just not going to be as strong of an application. So make sure you're giving yourselves enough time to actually complete it. We also recommend having folks review your application, but I think this tip might be coming up on a future slide. So we want to see that your startup is ready to move to the next stage. We want to see that you'll be able to utilize $10,000 or $50,000 to really advance your company. So we want to see evidence that you have a capable team. If you're a solo founder, this will include your experience, but you could also have advisors and supporting communities supporting you. So we really want to see that even if you're a solo founder or have a small team, you're really utilizing your community and your resources around you to move your business forward. We want to get a sense that you're committed to building a scalable company. So we want to see that you have your sights set on being that multi-million-dollar company, and we want to see recent momentum and traction. So what have you accomplished in the last 6 months to show us that you're really ready to utilize $10,000 or $50,000 to get from A to B and really start to grow and scale? So we assess your applications on the impact of the grant. So we have grant cycles twice a year, every year. So we really want to get a sense of why now is the right time for you to receive a grant during this current cycle. So how will the grant funds, how will the programming if you're applying for micro, and how will the NC IDEA network really help you achieve your business goals to help you move your business forward, extend your runway, get initial customers, grow your customer base, and really grow a successful company. We do not provide research grants, so we are really looking for goals that will help you commercialize your company. We want to understand what milestones you're tracking, and really, we emphasize why now is the right time. So really be thinking about that and how you are situated now to really utilize those funds to be successful. We also ask that you be honest. We know all companies who are applying for our grants are early stage, and we know that you don't have everything figured out, and that's okay. The application is not meant to be an extended sales pitch, and we'll be able to tell if that is what you've done. So we're really just asking you to be honest. Obviously, brag about your accomplishments, but also really be honest about kind of where you are with your business, how the grant funds can really help you figure things out, maybe test a few different marketing strategies, or if you're kind of figuring out your business model, how our team of advisors and network can help you figure that out. So just really be honest about where you are with your business, things you've accomplished, but also how our network and the NC IDEA funds could help in that effort to move your business forward. We have about 40 to 50% of our applicants are reapplicants. And our guest grantee today, Ashlyn, can definitely touch on that, on how Fashionably was a reapplicant. So we really are, for our reapplicants, since we've seen these companies before, we're really looking to understand what progress we've made since the last application. And thinking about AI tools, we understand that you probably will use an AI tool to help you either bring your question or help you get some thoughts together for how you want to answer questions in the application, or doing any sort of research or getting feedback about some of your answers. We just ask that you don't exclusively use AI tools to fill out the application, because it can be very obvious. So AI does not know your business like you do. So just make sure that you're not using it to completely fill out your application, and that you are including your own voice in the application. Be clear and concise. So as I said, we do have character count limits on the questions. So make sure that you are being as clear and concise as possible. So our group of reviewers, who I'll talk about in a minute, a lot of them have expertise in the industries that you are applying for, but not everyone does. So really make sure that your application and your company can be explained to anyone. So make sure that it's clear, the problem you're trying to solve and your solution, so that any reviewer can understand what your company is. And the best way to do this, as I mentioned earlier, is to have others review your application before you submit it. So make sure that it makes sense, and that others can understand your company and your business plan without maybe necessarily understanding your industry. So the initial application objective is not to win a grant. It's actually to move to the next stage. So as Amy said, for micro, there's 2 stages, and for seed, there's 3. So you really want the reviewer to say, I want to learn more about this company. So you don't have the character count ability to say everything that you probably want to. So really focus on sharing enough to get reviewers interested, to show that you're competitive enough to move to the next stage. And that's when you'll be able to elaborate more and share more about your business. So talking about the review team, it will consist of NCIDEA staff. So all 10 of us here on staff do review applications. For seed, we also have graduate associates who review applications and conduct due diligence interviews with seed semifinalist references. And then we have our group of external reviewers who are volunteers from across the state who represent other entrepreneurs, investors, ecosystem partners, so folks who support entrepreneurs and who are also subject matter experts in a variety of industries. All of our reviewers are vetted, recommended to us, and they all sign confidentiality agreements and do disclose any conflicts of interest before reviewing applications. For the initial seed application, you'll receive 3 reviews. So you'll receive a staff review, a graduate associate review, and an external review. For micro, you'll receive 2. So you'll receive a staff review and an external review. Once you move forward to the semifinalist stage, you receive 10 to 12 reviews, and then the finalist, you receive 30, just from all the folks who are in the room for your final presentation. For the microfinals, you'll receive feedback from NCIDEA staff who attend your micro final presentation interview. So reviewers are instructed to be constructive but actionable. So in your feedback, you'll receive some criticism potentially, but also some actionable notes about just things to consider, maybe contacts or questions. Reviewers may not always agree. So since you are receiving a couple of different reviews, they may have different opinions on your strategy regarding different things or your industry. So really just take all the feedback in, but also ultimately you are the expert with your business. So really incorporate the feedback that makes the most sense to you, but also be open to feedback and receiving different opinions about your business. Reviewers may focus on different parts of your application or business in their feedback. So if we have a reviewer who has a strong background in marketing, they really may focus on your customer acquisition plan or your marketing strategy. Other folks who may have a really strong background in your technology may focus on your solution. So it really just depends on what reviewers may want to focus on. But we do say, so you will receive feedback at every stage that you are a part of in the application process, and it really does add a lot of value. So, if you are not able to ultimately win a grant, we do hope that the feedback is really valuable to the application process for you. All right, just some additional application tips. Please do not wait until the last minute to submit. 5 p.m. on August 25th is the cutoff. So we will not be able to accept applications after that time. We do have a new portal that we're really excited about, and we're really excited for you all to use if you're applying this cycle, but it is new. So just be prepared for anything. We'll always, of course, be here. We're testing it and it looks great, but it is a new system. So please start early, submit early, just in case. Watch out for any spelling and grammar errors. It's just a distraction to your application if there's a lot of spelling errors or grammatical mistakes. So just proofread for those issues so it's not a distraction from your business plan for reviewers. We recommend saving your online application often so you don't lose any of your work. You can save it, log out, and log back into it. And if you're working on your application with a team member or a co-founder, make sure that neither of you are in the application at the same time for at risk of overwriting information. And also, you're welcome to work offline in the application template. Just be sure to give yourselves enough time to move the information in the offline template into the online application, since each question is an individual section. So you do need to give yourselves time to actually transfer that information over. Okay, and lastly, before I pass it over to Ashlyn to share her experience as a grant recipient, next steps are really just visiting our website. As Amy said, we have a ton of information on our website for potential applicants for you to learn more about micro and seed and the upcoming grant cycle. So you can sign up for office hours on our website, download the application templates, and please feel free to go ahead and do that today and get started. There's no reason to wait. The online application will officially open on July 28th, and you're welcome to log in and get started on that day. But yeah, visit our website to learn more about micro and seed and review all of the different resources we have available there. Okay. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen and we'll pass it over to Ashlyn to share a little bit more about her experience. And please don't hesitate to keep asking questions.
Awesome. Hi, guys. Super excited to chat a little bit with you. I'll give you just a really quick overview of our business, who we are and what we do. Fashionably is building the future of online shopping in outfits based on your style. So if you think through kind of the current e-commerce solution today, we are forcing all of us to scroll endlessly online through what we call secondary data points like size, budget, and color, when really the thing that actually drives purchase is seeing something that we resonate with and that we love. So we're kind of turning e-commerce on its head and saying, what if shopping actually started with style first? And how can we serve those solutions to customers in a way that's really beautiful and seamless and fun for the first time? So yeah, would love to talk a little bit about kind of my very first application, what I did there and what was different versus the 2024 application where we ultimately became a seed recipient, because I think that's probably the most helpful thing for everyone. So we originally applied in 2022. We were about a year and a half into our business, and we were right on the cusp of technically a little too far for micro, but like right under the radar of kind of the revenue milestones for seed. And so, you know, still very early on in the business, we were at around $50,000 in revenue. And the primary difference between that first application and the second was really all about metrics for us. So the first application, we talked a lot about the same exact problem, the same exact solution that we did on the 2024 application. But when we talked about what would we use this grant for, what would the impact really be to our business, the only thing that we talked about there was bringing one of our contractors on full time. And if we had this full-time employee, we would be able to grow and it would get us to the next level. We would be able to reach kind of our next milestones. And at that point in the business as well, we really didn't have a ton around metrics and data. To be honest with you, at that point, we were still, you know, very early on testing things. And so the difference between 2022 application and 2024 was 2024 was all about the data for us. And we really were able to go in and show this is the very specific piece that we need to use this grant for. And we are going to take our revenue, our stylist revenue carry per week from this dollar amount to this dollar amount. We are going to increase our retention from this percentage to this percentage. And all of these things together is going to help us to kind of get to the next phase of growth and ultimately, you know, be able to raise subsequent rounds and kind of go through that process there. So those are really the main difference, I think, on our side that we had was we had a lot more data, we had a lot more traction, we had a lot more clarity just around how could we actually use this money and how would that benefit us specifically with this grant. And so the other thing that I'll say too, and then, you know, happy to answer any and all questions there, but I'll just second what Lee said about the application process itself being so helpful. I honestly, truly feel like that 2022 application and then seeing some of the feedback from that initial application is kind of what started us on getting a little bit more into the metrics and the data and kind of, you know, building out our business plan and building out our growth and projections there. It was really instrumental in giving us some of that early feedback and starting to reach out for other resources. Same thing with our second application, 2024, because we went through those multiple review rounds with, you know, the semifinals and some of the outside grant reviewers. the input and the feedback we got from that was absolutely invaluable. I still remember one of the specific things we got in the semifinals round around TAM and how we were calculating that. And one of the reviewers said, hey, I see where you're going here, but I would actually take a deeper look at this because I think this might be a flag for certain investors. So many examples I could give like that really, really were super helpful for us as we were starting to kind of kick off, our very first fundraise around the same time that we were applying. So super, super helpful, even just with going through the process of the application and then the feedback that you get from that.
Thank you, Ashlyn. And thanks for sharing that you applied more than once, because that's something that is very, very common. Yeah, close to 50% of our seed applicants each cycle have applied to micro or seed in the past. So something that our reviewers staff are very, very familiar with. And that's why we ask in the application, have you applied in the past? Because we want to hear what's changed. Sometimes a lot has changed about a business, sometimes just a little. Ashlyn, can you just talk a little bit about how you thought about like grant impact? Like, we're really clear at NCAD of like what that means to us, but like, how did you think about it and get across like what this, and I know you talked about using the data, but how did you even like think about it internally of kind of conveying truly what it could do to your business over like the 6 or 8 months of the grant period?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, it really was looking at this as being a very, very critical, crucial step in allowing us to get to that next phase of the business and growth. So I talked a little bit about, the stylist revenue carry and the retention piece. We had been in some very early kind of investor conversations when we started the application, and a lot of the feedback we were getting was around that retention piece. And for us, a little bit more of our story, we were a very bootstrap, scrappy business. We, had a great early customer acquisition and made a lot of money on a very unscalable product. We had a Google Doc and then a PDF. And so when we were getting that feedback around retention, it was, man, yeah, we know we need to focus on that, but we don't have the resources or the tools to even be able to tackle that where we're at right now. And so the grant specifically allowed us to be able to say, okay, great, we have this funding now in order to focus on this really, really critical piece of our business. And this is going to be the thing that launches us and gets us, again, both to the next stage of growth, but is also a proof point for a lot of other, groups and investors after that.
So there is a question about what, excuse me, what advice would you give founders who are like on the fence, between deciding between micro and seed? Because you talked about that for the first application. Yeah,
I mean, in hindsight, I wish that we had applied for micro when we did. I mean, I think, am I correct that $50,000 is typically the suggested revenue amount, or am I off on that between micro and?
Oh, so we've actually kind of taken that back because it varies so much. So
Okay.
that was kind of the, yes. So we've removed that because we realized that was not as much of a, so in the past, we said that for micro, if you have more than 50K in revenue, sorry, for a company, this 150K in revenue, you might be less competitive for micro. But what we found is over the years, some companies were kind of doing non-scalable businesses that were bringing in that revenue.
Yep.
And besides the revenue, they were really micro competitive companies. So,
Yep.
And we've just learned so much. So we've actually taken that kind of out as a deciding factor.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, where we were at in the business, I was the only person full time. I had 2 or 3 contractors that were helping support, again, kind of that unscalable business that we had at the time. So we were very, very lean. We had processes and operations for sure, but it was very scrappy. And we, at that point, did not have a super, super repeatable, okay, we have learned this about the business and we know that this is the exact thing that we need to build yet. I would say we were in like a 1.5 phase there. And I think for seed, coming in really, really strong and saying, we know this exact thing is what we are going to use this grant for, and this is the impact it's going to make, is probably, more so the deciding factor. Yeah.
Got it. And then there's another question for you about what other things your company, really you had done prior to even applying, like what was your team size? And I think you just talked about that with contractors and like years of operation.
Yeah, so 2024, it was myself and 2 co-founders at that point that I had brought on, between that time period, 2022 and 2024. And we had a pretty large contractor base at that point. We had 20 contract stylists. I think we were, so 2024, we would have been about 3.5 years into the business officially. So we had grown a lot between 2022 and 2024 as well. Revenue wise, gosh, I'm trying to remember where we were at. 2023, I think we were at like 150K for 2023. And we're, continuing to grow and showing really kind of strong numbers beginning of 2024 when we applied.
Got it. And then there's a question about tracking B2C engagement. So what data points are the most important for B2C engagement, and how do you gut check tools to figure out basically, how do you figure which tools are the most effective for your business?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I feel like we're constantly, learning and relearning those. For us, revenue is everything. Again, I mentioned that was part of our story early on. We were bootstrapped, and it was how many customers are paying us this week, full stop. That is kind of the main tool that we're using to track. Obviously, there's other inputs there. This is probably very specific based on each business, but our customer acquisition is primarily through organic content. And so that was, sales was kind of a lagging indicator for us. Let's see how our content's performing this week. That's obviously going to trickle into how many customers are we getting. And then retention again now is really our strongest metric and our number one thing that we're tracking. It's not just how many customers are purchasing every week, but how many customers are coming back and repurchasing and continuing to use the platform.
And then for others, if you do have questions, you can put them in the Q&A. But Ashlyn, so one of the things that you have raised funds. So one of the things we see a lot in applications is, we ask, is someone, is a company raising funds, or they plan to in the future? And especially for seed, it's not uncommon that people indicate that they might be doing that if they're not already doing that. But can you just speak to a little bit about the reality of like how much time that takes for a founder, and get any advice that you have if a company is thinking, about getting the seed funding and also fundraising, anything you want to share there?
Yeah, man, you guys, maybe we'll write a book on this one day, to be honest with you. The last year specifically, it takes so much time. I mean, I think you've got to have some really, really strong team members, especially if you have a business that is operating and running and you're working with customers every day. This takes so much of your time, so much of your time. And it's both really helpful, and it is also time away from the business. I think that's a big thing that I learned the hard way last year, is that focus and energy you have to choose. And if it's going to go somewhere, something else is going to kind of go to the wayside. And so, the best, I hate that I'm saying this because people told me this for years before I raised money, but literally the best money is just customers paying you for what you're doing. And if you have the option to figure out, from a bootstrap way, how to make that work, and just getting more customers and being as super scrappy and lean as possible before you go out and raise, would highly suggest that. But I think the biggest piece of advice that I would give just around that whole process in general is however long you think it's going to take you to raise money, you should double that or triple that amount of time that it's going to take. And that's just the reality. Even if you have all the connections and network and everything in the world, it's just going to take time to find that exact right person, the right mix of people, and just make sure that you're in a really, really strong place in your business when you do go out to do that. You'll be in a much better position.
Thank you for that. And then sorry, let's look at I don't know if that's specifically for Fashionably, but kind of following up just on one thing I want to mention to people is some questions are coming in around revenue, and I think just in listening to what Ashlyn's been saying is on the seed and micro pages on ncidea.org. So if you go to ncidea.org, click on the orange bar to say learn more, and then you can link to the micro and seed pages. Under eligibility, we've put some updated revenue for past grant recipients, aggregated the last few years of broken down by business category. So you can see how many grant recipients at the time they applied indicated they had revenue, broken up by software, consumer product company, food and beverage, more kind of advanced materials and like tech type companies. So so if you're kind of considering which grant to apply to, or wondering, oh gosh, we don't have revenue, for some companies that's maybe a little bit more common versus For example, CPG companies and food and beverage companies absolutely 100% have to have revenue for both micro and seed. So we've updated those numbers on our website. So just wanted to share that with individuals. And then there is a question around positive indicators for tractions and a pre-seed, pre-revenue, early stage startup. I'll answer quickly and then I'll kick it to Ashlyn to get your feedback too. So for us, we look at like strategic partnerships. If there's any other like key maybe grants that a startup has received that's going to fund like R&D development, while our funds can help fund the growth of the business. If there is always what we might think of as traction that would resonate with their target market. So whether it's coverage in certain media that we know is going to get them in front of their target market, and they can really take advantage and use our funding to help propel them forward. Or it could be letters of intent. It could be purchase orders, or again, from other possible key potential customers. In the past too, one of the things is if there's a pilot project, especially for seed, that a company is getting good data on, going back to Ashlyn's comment about data. So good data, and maybe just what they need to turn that pilot customer into a paying customer is something to do with the product or onboarding, that our funds can help them do that. But they have such great data from the pilot that it really seems a really clear indicator that this is being used, there's engagement with the product or service. And so Ashlyn, what are you seeing in terms of other signs besides, revenue, cash in the door that kind of indicate traction?
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak to consumer for sure. I know there's so many other businesses and models, life sciences and all those things where it's just not relevant. But if you're building a consumer company, revenue is the one and only thing that there's just so many tools today. And again, I know I come from my own kind of experience, but our very first version of our product, we used Venmo for payment. We did not have a website. We used Google Docs and Gmail, and that was it. And we got paying customers. So there's ways that you can kind of prove that traction out, even if you don't have the funds to completely build your tech app from the beginning. So much with AI today as well. I mean, there's so many, companies and founders that I know of now that have no experience, building, and they're using some of those like low code, no code things to at least have a proof of concept and get a few paying customers on there and generate some traction that way. So I would still go back and at least for consumer and say, find out a way to get people to pay you with their hard-earned money. And that's going to be the best proof you can give.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And Ashlyn, is there anything else that you want to share with potential applicants?
I think that's it. I mean, like I said, definitely if you're on the fence about doing the application, I would highly recommend doing it. It is so helpful just as a frame to help you go through and think about your business, where you're at in your business, get some good feedback from there. Anything that you guys would want tips or anything on, happy to chat over LinkedIn or anything else. If you have any questions, always here to help as much as I can.
Thank you. And there was just a question about, if a company is a B2B AI LLM company, what does the revenue need to be? And for us too, we think about, if you go to the micro or seed pages under the eligibility, and then we have the revenue information, again, we assume probably every software company is employing AI in some capacity, whether it's an existing tool versus building their own LLM. So I would just look at the category of company that you'd place yourself in, whether it's like a B2B software company or any others. We'd still look for that same type of, are people paying you? As Ashlyn said, like, do you have any signs of retention? Do you find that people are actually using your tool repeatedly versus like, oh, they have such a problem, they're looking for any tool that would solve the problem, but then if they're not engaging with your tool, it's not a real indication that they would review. But if you are, going by Ashlyn's point, if you are a non-technical founder and you haven't explored what could be done, either through that, like that what Ashlyn was talking about, like through Google Sheets and Venmo, or through using a low code, I really recommend you doing that. So even if you haven't done it yet, you can speak to you're exploring these tools because they're so available and they're advancing so fast that you don't need to really understand code to know that if a tool could be helpful for you. So I would definitely recommend looking into those if you've got a tech company and you are thinking that you need to spend huge amounts of money just to get off the ground. A lot of competitive companies that are applying aren't waiting for that. They're getting started, just like Ashlyn was talking about. And Ashlyn, thank you so much for coming back and giving back to the community. We know you are very, very busy, but hearing from you is so impactful for potential applicants.
Awesome. Anytime. Thank you guys.
All right, thanks.
The
For
end.
everyone, good luck applying. And yeah, we look forward to seeing your applications and talking to many of you during office hours. All right, good luck, everyone.